And I said, oh my God, I'm going to be learning this about this for the rest of my life. Nothing could have been truer. Because I saw the gaps in what I didn't understand. I knew this was an important time. And I looked at my chart later and I go, oh my God. Everything was lined up in the chart to do something important for my life. And I ended up on top, I showed up on top of the pyramid for that. Through, hearing about things and wanting to go do them, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, it took me there. So, one of the things that I learned recently is from one of my favorite people called Gemini Brett. His name is Brett Joseph, but he goes by Gemini Brett. And I took a class online with him in astronomy for astrologers. And he's shamanic learning. So if I had come and talked last night, I was here, but I didn't know I would be here or not. So Mary put me in the middle of today. And what he did was help you see the sky in the chart and the chart in the sky. So I'll give you first what I would have opened last night with is there's an ecliptic. There's a sun's path across the sky, and the planets follow that same path generally, either above the line of the sun or below the line of the sun. And if you want to bring that into consciousness, there are 4 cardinal points in the sky and the 4 cardinal points in the chart. And it basically is about all those things we ask about most of all. Yourself, your purpose and career in life, your aspiration, your partnerships and closest relationships, and your home and family and your soul roots. So he had music written for this and a singer and glorious graphics in his artwork on the website. And you can do this, emphasize it with your hands. The sun rises over there, right? Or don't you know?
Love.
The rise. The rise. The reach. Midheaven. Lunch. The rest. Sunset. The rest. And the root. The rise, the reach, the rest, and the root. So anywhere you are in the day, bring your day's consciousness represented by the sun. Like, what am I doing, and what do I do next, and what's going on? Think of which place you are, and what's the next cardinal point. So in the morning, you're on the rise, and at noon, the reach, and already after lunch, you feel you're moving toward the rest. You want to take a nap after lunch. And then when you reach 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, it's time to start resting the mind, resting the emotions, maybe socializing, doing relaxing things. That's the rest. And the root, when you're asleep, when you're going your deep dreaming, and the cleansing cycles, the spirits serve you by refreshing and renewing your body. But you can pray into each of those points. Pray into the root where the work is done. Pray into the rise. When you rise, listen. Before you rise, listen. Because there's a very active spirit talking in those times of the morning. Do you see that? Has anyone experienced that? And then the reach, what you're working for that quadrant. So the rise, the reach, the rest, and the root. And orient yourself to the ecliptic. Orient yourself here on this earth with what's really going on around you and is not separate from your environment at all. Now lately, I am a little over halfway through a study with the Avalon School. studying under David and Faye Cochran, vibrational astrology. It's almost like a redundancy. It's like a repetition in terms. Because everything is vibrational. Everything. It is where we are already connected before you even walked on this property the first time. But here they teach it. We teach you everything is vibrational. Here, Mary does vibrational work. Vibrational work. All of it. And I realized, I had one of those moments where dragon bumps break out all over your body because you realize something that's true. That this is the core astrology. And David Cochran, in the 90s, went off the grid. He was living in Florida in a house with no electricity. During the week, he would interview people. Thousands of people. On the weekends, he would go to the lab at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and he would crunch the numbers. And what he was creating was astrology as an evidence-based practice in science. He was matching the experiences of people with their charts and finding out that the way we practice astrology of all the traditions from medieval and Indian and all that is built up over the years with beautiful techniques that have meaningful interpretations and applications. But behind it, there was evidence-based practice. So we think of the sciences. What do you have? Your physics. By the way, physics was brought into the culture by someone who studied planetary motion. That's what physics is based on. The cycles of planetary motion. So then we could have calendars. They couldn't digitize calendars on the internet without the help of astrologers, because they'd already known it for centuries. So that's physics. Oh, if it's physics, it's the highest science there is. It's verifiable by physics, quantum physics, physics. The other one, biology. Biology. That's evidence-based. Go out, look at nature, study nature, define nature. What do they do? What do they look like? What do they do? Everything. It's biology, plants, animals. Biology. Chemistry. Yeah. There's a corporation I'm trying to study right now called the Rand Corporation. It started in the 40s. It started in the 40s? Or in the 70s? Anyway, they're a research group, nonprofit, and they address things that are problems and finding out what's really going on. And medicine, how ancient is medicine? How varied is medicine? How diversified is medicine? Not until the 1970s was medicine and evidence-based practice. Now psychology is evidence-based. Medicine is getting to be more and more, especially with DNA testing of medications and whether they're going to do for you what they're supposed to do, whether they do nothing, or if they do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. Like psychotropic medicines that make you manic. or antidepressant medicines that make you suicidal. What's not working? They don't test it to the person's own DNA. They're making breakthroughs in cancer because they're DNA testing medicine now. That's evidence-based practice. That has integrity. And when they do a study, they take extreme case samples, right? Those that are undeniably, observably, repeatedly, observably true. And they sample. So David Cochran had 40-some thousand timed charts of people, known people. And when they do a research, they look for those that show a certain vibration. Every aspect and geometrical aspect and relationship in your chart carries a vibration. And it's not just your basic 5. Conjunction, square, opposition, trine, sextile. (360 degrees in a chart. Multiples of 360 degrees in a chart. Each represent a different vibration. And you carry a whole series of vibrations in a chart. And the highlights in the chart. So this is last night. And I just first want to, before I go on with vibrational astrology, I just want to tell you what's going on in the sky right now that may be affecting everybody. The theme, the most powerful theme for this year is Pluto changing the sign from Capricorn to Aquarius. And it takes many years for Pluto to go through a sign. It's that slow. So it's really grinding through the sign. And it's just going back and forth between that 29 and 1 degree cusp between Capricorn and Aquarius. So we're going from Capricorn as a sign of structure and management. Management of structures, management of nature, management of selves, management of anything that forms an organization of behavior and building structures and moving forward. It's ruled by Saturn. Now, I'm interfusing what we're learning through vibrational astrology and how it compares to the traditional astrology we all follow, and we've collected from many cultures having done astrology and techniques, and what we habitually turn to for our interpretations. Well, you know how people feel about Saturn. How do you feel about Saturn? Is Saturn a good planet or a bad planet?
Depends where it sits.
Is what?
It depends where it sits.
That's all I know.
It's got rings. That's a physical description. Yeah. When people say, oh, Saturn's hitting my ring, because they think they're going to lose something, or they're going to be stopped from doing something they want. How do you feel about Jupiter? Jupiter is very positive. It's called the greater benefic. Saturn's called the greater malefic. Venus is the smaller benefic. Mars is the lesser malefic. I'm outgrowing that very quickly. And actually, Jupiter and Saturn are reversed. People think of Jupiter more, I'm going to give you rich, more money, more. The key word for Jupiter is one word: more. And that's it. Higher teacher, maybe. Now, if it makes you a pedophile to your students, because you want more of what you benefit from being a teacher and being admired and fall in love with, like that women's gymnastic coach.
She got stabbed in the jail. Did you see that?
Anyway, Jupiter means more, and it can be an exaggerator. It can be critically exaggeration to a sickness more. I kind of thought about that, and the explanation I came up with is in the medieval times when astrologers were important people and well known and consulted by high officials and wealthy people, they couldn't live at the level of a high regarded human without getting a lot of money for their consultations and their readings. So their clients were rich people and royalty and kings and queens and anyone who could pay a lot of money for their consultations. Now, how would they feel about a planet that gave them more? They'd like that planet a lot, and they did. They wanted Jupiter. How would they feel about a planet that put them on a course of sticking to foundational things and ethical things that last, and eliminated that which was superficial and frivolous? They wouldn't like that planet. They would call that planet Satan. Saturn. I don't want any Saturn. I only want Jupiter. And that's how the interpretation was colored by the culture in it, which it was practiced. Saturn is your friend. Jupiter, on a good day, is your friend. But they work together, and they do not work against one another. They work together. And this working together in not just pairs of planets, 2 planets, but in configurations of 3 and 4 or more planets that are exactly by degree and by minute aligned with each other, is where the vibrations come through individually for each person. You are like a radio receiver and sender of vibrations. Those vibrations charts, Vedic astrology, Hindu astrology has harmonic charts, same thing. They did that going back maybe the longest time of any. We call them vibrational charts now. Your set of the most powerful vibrational charts from your natal chart are your loudest channels on that radio. They're the strongest channels. They're the 24-hour super channels we looked for when we wanted to listen to rock and roll music all night, or to Art Bell all night, talk about aliens all night. That's what a super strong vibration in your chart is like. And it's a vibration that operates every day, and you're well aware of it because it's so strong. The geometry between the planets is where the real essence of astrology lies. Stronger than signs, stronger sun signs, stronger than houses. Because in each time we set it to a new vibrational chart, the aspects repeat but in different places and configurations. And what David did was he invented a software that could do that. Others, people, Astro Gold can find harmonic charts and give you midpoints. A planet that is at the midpoint of two other planets is a powerful configuration. If three planets are at a midpoint structure and they're also in aspect to each other, it's twice as powerful. And that we can find in a chart like this, like yesterday's. Now, so Pluto is about power. Pluto is about undeniable truth, evidence-based truth, whether you like it or not. When it touches something in your chart by transit or progression, it cannot be denied. It cannot be avoided. It will show you the truth about what's happening. The idea is to embrace it and to make the transformations within yourself. Use therapy, use anything you want, but you face up to the truth of what's working and what's not working. It's a god of the underworld. It's a god of the place where things can be hidden for a certain amount of time, but then they come up. You know, Persephone always comes back in the spring. She does not stay underground. Today, your favorite planet is standing still. Venus is stationary retrograde today. And actually, it's effective for a couple of days because if it's on the same degree and the same minute, it's still in stationary mode. But today is the flip. It's at 28 degrees of Leo. It's going to retrograde back to 12 degrees of Leo. So if you have a chart, your chart, you look at those degrees in your chart where they are in the house. And this is where you'll feel the action of a retrograde Venus. Life in retrograde is a powerful place. It's not to be disregarded. It's not to be avoided. It's not to be ignored. It's a voice of that planet within. Because it's going apparently backwards through the degrees, it's going over things of the past. Maybe the past in present time, maybe the past in lifetime, like children, childhood issues, maybe the past in previous lifetimes. It rules relationships, it rules possessions, it rules our relationship with the earth. The purpose for it is to reconsider and research for future growth. So, you might have an old lover show up or contact you. You might have the energy of an old lover show up in a new love interest. But if you look clearer, you look carefully, and you really look at that person, you might recognize that they're starting the same energy you had with the old lover in a new face, in a new form. So that's your inner work that you do. Retrograde is about inner work. People with lots of retrograde planets in their chart over one are working on issues from a previous existence in the crises that come up. And it's a chance for them to change their attitude. The one thing that can turn a positive or a negative looking aspect or a challenging aspect into a positive strength building experience is one thing under your total control. It's attitude. Attitude. So Venus is going retrograde today. Mercury's going to 23rd of August, going on one of its 3 retrogrades per year. Let's see, read you something. I'm trying to look for the little arrow. Okay.
I have a question.
Question.
If we are in Venus retrograde, what does that mean if you're going to apply for
Well, first of all, astronomically, it means that Venus is between us and the Sun. During the retrograde period, like Mercury or Venus are closest to the Earth. When they're on the other side of the Sun, they're in direct motion. And when they're the closest to the Earth, this is the thing with Mercury retrograde, it's just probably you're getting so much information from that it's hard to keep it organized, and you don't feel like you're in control. By the way, you're never really in control, but you are in control. So, Mercury and Venus are inundating you with extra information because they're between the Earth and the Sun. So that means there's intense experiences around relationships. And with Mercury, it's intense experiences around getting things done, communication, being understood or misunderstood. And that's what that means. There's an inner voice for retrograde Mercury and an outer voice for direct.
Too small. Too small.
So, in ancient Egypt, Mercury corresponded to the god Thoth, and that is like the word thought. And Thoth was represented by two animals, a baboon, which sat quietly, and another little monkey who had a device. So the baboon that sat and contemplated is like retrograde Mercury. The one that was using his iPhone and his device on the boat, he's like the direct Mercury, talking all the time. So it's like that kind of different energy. So what does what does astrology really mean? I'm going to review. I'm not getting this to work as fast as I want it to, so I'll keep talking. Isabel Hickey in the 1950s and 60s came out with a new kind of a spiritual astrology that upset everybody because she included the spiritual in her interpretations, not just the mundane events. And she said what astrology teaches is that attitude is everything. And I avoid making predictions. I like forecasting with astrology. It's like a climate report, a weather report. It can change. It can change suddenly or slowly. It can change. So forecasting is good for those kinds of astrology that are practical. Like you want to sell your house. When is a good time to sell the house? When are the aspects and the vibrations in a positive flowing mode that will facilitate your doing what you want to do? That's electional astrology. Pick a time. Pick a time to get married. Pick a time to move. Pick a time to apply for a new job. Things of that nature. It's also historically been very useful for medicine and health and diagnosis. The correspondences between the parts of the body and the planetary energy is always good. Horary astrology is in the moment. If you ask a question, the answer is in that chart. A yes or a no, even. And you pay attention to that. So it is a timekeeper. It put time into a context. It put time on a map. You can put that star map onto a geographic map and find out the best places that you could live for what you want. David Cochran on his application, on his technology for astrology, has astro maps, and you can pick from a treasure chest what you want in the place that you're going to live. If you want friends and family, it will show you along which planetary lines those places are on the earth. And I offered my chart for one of our classes, our Zoom classes, and I was born in Gary, Indiana, and it had very powerful lines coming through, both negative, challenging, and positive. I was very sick as a young child. I was allergic to, God forbid, a pharmaceutical drug called penicillin.
Oh, me too.
They didn't know that there was such a thing. They had me studied at Mayo Clinic to help students get their medical degrees. Finally, there was a doctor who had the courage to call it out and tell what it was and what supplements could be used to correct it, at least in symptoms. And then that upset my father greatly. He had a heart attack, and so we both needed help. He found a placement for a congregation in Southern California. David put this chart up on a map, up on the device, an astrocartography map, and the positive lines going through Southern California were outstanding. He couldn't have picked a better place for me to completely reverse and improve my health. That's just one example. There's a place along the coast of California that I just love. I've never lived there, I've only visited. Every time I've visited, I feel exhilarated. It's called Morro Bay. There's a huge rock off the coast that they tried to break up, and then they reconstructed it because it had been such a draw for visitors and tourists. But for some reason, I just love Morro Bay. I have lunch there, I can see the ocean, I feel wonderful. Why don't I live here, you know? And looked on the map, and the line of Jupiter goes exactly through Morro Bay on the coast of California. It's like expands happy feelings. Very interesting. There's two planetary lines that cross at a place in Arizona that I discovered on my way to college. It was the copper mine by the father of Jenny Jerome, who was Winston Churchill's mother. It's called Jerome. It's like an art colony, a little artist colony, a funky place with happy bars and hippie places. And I try to visit it whenever I'm out that way. It turns out that's where two good planetary lines on the map cross. It could, you could have lines across where one of your relatives or friends lives. You don't have to live in the place, but your awareness of that place is affected by the vibrations of the planet compared to that place on the earth. There's There's no separate box for different applications of astrology. I love the story or the joke about the difference between men and women. It's cliche, I know. But the thing is, men have separate boxes. And women tend to, try to put boxes together and combine boxes and jump from one box to another. And oh, and by the way, over there, and this and over there, this. And the guys are going, what were you talking about? We were just talking about this. What now? What's this? And there's more connectivity. I don't know if that's in the brain structure, but that's one of the myths about it. The other thing that we need to learn about Venus, and I have a article about it, and then I did a slide talk about it, and I did part of a slide talk for Mary's women's group last month, and it's called Venus Unchained. What do you think of that? Venus Unchained. In comparing how the planet Venus is regarded in ancient cultures and their astrologies, it's not even unanimously assigned to feminine energy. In China, in India, the gods and goddesses are male. In medieval times, it was a renaissance of Greek mythology, and there she is, the goddess Venus, rising on the half shell. And that's what Botticelli painted, and it's become an iconic picture for Venus. So, Venus is not, is for anybody. Venus for a man, Venus for a woman, still Venus. Its principle is simple, but very complex. It's beauty. Venus is beauty, an attraction to beauty in any of its forms, to the same sex, to a different sex, to nature and beauty, beauty in the arts, beauty in artistic expression, beauty in literature. That's a Venus vibration for beauty. If you have it prominent in your chart, it's going to affect, ruling what? Taurus, our relationship with the earth. We sure need a lot of Venus energy these days. It also rules Libra, which is relations. All my relations. Let me show you. Venus Unchained. See, in our civilization timeline, you have times in which these civilizations had an astrology were active. Look how long the line for Egypt is between the two yellow stars is very long. The time for the Greek Hellenistic time of astrology is very short between the stars here. And the medieval picked up the Greek and picked it up into the medieval times. And all these other civilizations are much longer lasting. Venus, the keywords: love, beauty, attraction, pleasure, comfort, luxury, attraction, all that. These may be links in the chain, though. They may limit it to whether you're a woman or a man or what you're attracted to, and try to limit it. This is the iconic picture of Aphrodite from Greek mythology, arising on a half shell, and everyone was in love with her. Aphrodite was a goddess of love and beauty and one of the great Olympian divinities. After rising from the foam, first approached the island of Sakkara and went to Cyprus. And as she was walking on the coast, flowers sprang up under her feet. Such was her power. Eros and Himeros accompanied her to the assembly of the other great gods, and all of them were struck with admiration and love when she appeared, and her surprising beauty made everyone desire to have her for his wife. According to the cosmologic views of nature, Aphrodite was the personification of the generative powers of nature and the mother of all living beings. So that's her energy. She is depicted by the glyph that looks like a mirror. The symbol for Venus is often taken as a hand mirror, which seems appropriate here. The circle can be represented the sun or spirit above the cross of matter, indicating that spirit or even self is above the material. Venus and Mercury are more interesting to compare than Venus and Mars. What people were saying is the common assumption was differing from the symbol for Mercury by lacking the crescent of thought above the circle, indicates that Venus used taste and feelings to evaluate, but that they were mindless. Egypt has a mirror in a symbol of an ankh with a cross of matter underneath. The male triad and the feminine unit. The ankh is the Egyptian symbol for life. The handled cross or crux ansata, emblematic of the truth that a fruitful union of male and female produces life. So the ankh was used in Egypt. Here is Isis giving Seti I life through an ankh at his breath point. Isis of Egypt, ascendant sky mother. Hathor, Egypt's goddess of women. That's where the women got associated. Western civilization started in Egypt, not in Greece and Rome. Sekhmet is Egypt's goddess of war and healing, and she was a vicious avenger. There's a temple with a statue of Sekhmet in there, a very tall statue lit by a skylight. That they say, if the expression on her face is fierce, you have something to fear. You should be looking at yourself and changing something. If it's a pleasant expression, then you have her blessing. Inanna of the Mesopotamian tradition and her sisters. Inanna, also called Namu, is like a Christ story of crucifixion, going into the underworld, being naked, totally destroyed, and arising again. It's a Christ story. In India, Venus is called Shukra and is a male entity, the son of a great seer and astrologer, and is the enemy of Jupiter. Vedic astrology is about the relationship between the planets. In Chinese astrology, it is called the Great White Metal and represents evil that can come from the West. Very different. Mesopotamia, the Mayan and the Aztec, you had Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, both comparable to Egypt. For Venus. Venus was very important to the Mayan tradition and the Aztec traditions. Morning and evening star, they first thought that they were two different planets. The planet that rises above the sun in the morning is a morning star. The Venus that sets after the sun sets is the evening star. You can find out which one you have by looking at your chart. Qualities of the morning and evening star. Venus in the morning star is Lucifer, are socially impulsive and they rush into life. and love, acting before thinking. People born with Venus as an evening star, Hesperus, after the sun in the zodiac, tend to reflect before acting, and they are more able to identify with society's rules. And then there's the how far away is Venus from the sun. It can be not more than 48 degrees away from the sun, so it's always near the sun, either before or after the sun. And they have interpretations related to the earth signs. The closest Venus is to the sun carries a Taurus energy. The middle distance is carried by Virgo, I analyze. And the furthest distance from the sun is I utilize, or Capricorn. Now, the sacred geometry of Venus aspect on a cycle compared with the Earth is a golden ratio, phi, and it looks like this. See? The orbit of Venus over 8 years creates a configuration of a star. The golden rectangle, the golden spiral, is cast off of this in a Fibonacci sequence. And it's in nature everywhere. This is the star. This traces the orbits of Venus. And before your birth, the previous star point or conjunction of Venus with the sun carries an interpretation too. There's now books being written about this. But what I noticed first was that scientists, great scientists, had Venus-dominated charts. Would you have associated Venus with science?
Yeah. Because it's how they're born, what they're born into.
In esoteric astrology, it rules the fifth ray. And the fifth ray is a ray of concrete science. So I found that it's strong in the chart of prominent scientists. In a chart of Nikola Tesla, he had a Taurus rising ruled by Venus. And he had Venus conjunct the sun at the nadir, or the bottom of his chart. Very, very powerful. He had said he never married or wanted a relationship because his relationship was with nature. He was so fascinated by nature and the science he developed around studying nature. He could not give fair and equitable attention to a wife. The science of nature was his love. Now, in 1926, an interview with Collier's magazine, Nikola Tesla said, "Through countless generations from the very beginning, the social subservience of women resulted naturally in the partial atrophy, or at least the hereditary suspension of mental qualities which we now know the female sex to be endowed with no less than men." 1926. But the female mind has demonstrated a capacity for all the mental acquirements and achievements of men. And as generations ensue, that capacity will be expanded. The average woman will be as well educated as the average man, and then better educated, for dormant faculties of her brain will be stimulated to the activity that will be all the more intense and powerful because of centuries of repose. Women will ignore precedent and startle civilization with their progress. This is what Venus Unchained means. Michio Kaku, do you know this guy? Because I love him. He's so cool. He is American futurist, theoretical physicist, popularizer of science, professor of theoretical physics at City College of New York. He has a Venus ruled chart. Libra rising. Libra rising. So the ruler of the whole chart is Venus. That's what the Venus, and it's in strong aspect to other planets which indicates a prominence of Venus. He wrote a book called Math is the Mind of God, is from the future of the mind. Dr. Keku says we might imagine God as we know him to be a mathematician. The mind of God, we believe, is cosmic music, the music of strings resonating throughout 11-dimensional hyperspace. That is the mind of God. That is describing vibrational energy. In the 7 rays and planets, according to Alice Bailey, the 5th ray, concrete science, knowledge of science, is solely ruled by Venus. Other rays are ruled by pairs of planets, except for the 7th, which is ruled by Uranus. The 5th ray of knowledge, it's a concept, the vehicle of expression for the idealism of the mind of God, the urge to reveal law through intellect, the power to express divinity through deep penetration into matter. These are some key words associated with soul and 5th ray. I have a comment about someone soon. Here is the strength of these planets in this chart. They add up to 100%. Who is the iconic chart of this? Who is it? Someone who was born Sunday, January 4th, 1643, in Woolsthorpe, England. English physicist and mathematician who is widely recognized as one of the most influential scientists of all time. His work has been said to distinctly advance every branch of mathematics that's studied. Key figure in the scientific revolution and the father of modern science, Isaac Newton. Now, remember that picture by Botticelli of Venus on the half shell? Listen to what Isaac Newton said about himself. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself now and then in finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. That's Venus energy. So now we have a little upgrade of traditional astrology. Now how does our Mercury principle of thought from Egypt compare to Venus principle of concrete mind and science inquiry? In discovering the anatomy of the brain, I did a lot of work with a friend of mine called Gandalf Slick, or Gandalf. He studied the glia cells. This is what I think. The neurons send and transmit impulses throughout the brain. They correspond to Mercury. The glia cells surround and nourish each neuron. They also support the growth of these neurons toward the outer cortex, building in meditation the rainbow bridge of higher consciousness. Glia cells are Venus vibrations. They can even become neuron cells. The glia cells can turn into neurons if needed. Not only that, glia cells accompany every other cell in the body, comparing a glia body brain that is throughout the whole body. The glia network is 10 times larger than the neural network and actually controls all the functions of neurons throughout the body. Glia cells function as managerial units for neurons. They are capable of becoming neurons if necessary. They seamlessly connected throughout the body, communicating with one another. The brain of Albert Einstein had 70% more glia cells than the average human brain. 5 minutes? But you know, When the glia cells and the neurons are acting in unison, you know this is true. You've all had this happen to you. When you hear the truth without possibly having any other way to know it's true or not, the glias and the neurons sing together and you get goosebumps all over your body.
That's pretty cool.
That's the influence of the glia cells with the neurons. They sing in unison. There's a book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And it says that during the dominance of the Renaissance, the mercurial interpretation of thinking became dominant. Pre-literacy was a time when glias and neurons were working in unison. When writing and reading was limited to education for men only, it changed. It's coming back into balance now. He cites many, Leonard Schlang cites many examples through history. It's a fascinating book. Astrologers should read this book. Teachers should read this book. Anyone who works with other people in helping professions should read this book. But now they're coming more into balance because we have images and as much as writing for educating people generally. I was always disappointed when I went up to the adult section in the library and the books didn't have pictures anymore. I was so troubled by this because I loved looking at picture books when I was a child and checking them out at the library. Literacy was a formed chain of oppression. And who doesn't love books? I mean, really. What can be done? A renewal of the Venus mind. Now, pre-literate agrarian culture carried the pure energies of Venus through the signs. And it's called the Native American exaltation of Venus. Venus and Taurus, treat the earth well. It is not given to you by your parents, it was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Venus in Libra, Aho Mitakwi Oyasin, all my relations. I honor you in this circle of life with me today. I am grateful for this opportunity to acknowledge you in this prayer from the Lakota Sioux. And the exaltation of Venus is in Pisces. The Great Spirit is in all things. From the Wabanaki Algonquins. The Great Spirit is in all things. Vibration is in all things. So I am working on a certificate in vibrational astrology. And I did a couple readings this morning, all using vibrational astrology. And I'm doing one more today. And I have a notebook. I can take down names, numbers, email, and birth information. Do not give me anything but a certified time. Not guessing, not mama told me. It has to be a certificate validated time. And I have more charts to do in my studies. And if you want to be on a list of people to call and have maybe 15-20 minutes with me, no charge. It's my homework. Practicing giving readings in this new way. Any questions? So I'm greatly comforted by astrology being approached now and honored by physicists in universities all over the world. It's cosmobiology. Thank you, thank you, thank you.